Morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Good. Okay. Well, we're almost at the end of the quarter.
Yay.
Yeah, right. Sounds like you have parakeets.
We have 2 cockatiels.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
So what's up? What are you working on?
Nothing really. I've already finished all the lecture slides and I've been reviewing them a little bit, and I finished the learner.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get down all the names of the different body parts, more so the male parts than the female, because you guys
Sure.
have a lot of extra parts.
Yeah, it's all external, I guess.
Yeah. The muscles, the epididymis, all those different things.
Oh,
Deferens.
right. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Make a little sketch.
I'm just trying. Yeah. I'll try.
Hi, Andrea.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm home dealing with some little sickos today.
Oh, no, that's too bad.
Yeah, that's all right though. They're kind of getting better. They just have like a gastrointestinal virus or something like that.
Great.
Yeah, fun.
There's something going around right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember those days clearly.
I know they're sick, but they still have more energy than I do. So I'm not sure how that works.
Right? So what are you working on, Andrea? What are you concerned about?
I just need to kind of work a little bit more on some of the, like getting the hormones down and the stages and but right now I'm on the learning objection number 15, briefly mentioned 5 different methods of birth control.
Oh, okay.
So would that just be like the pill, the IUD,
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to make sure students are, in case there are people that aren't aware of birth control, they at least know that there are some options out there.
Right. Okay.
It seems kind of hard to imagine that there would be people that aren't aware of birth control, but I never know.
Right.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, I'm sure I would be.
I think I'm gonna pause my phone because I have the TV playing in the background. This way I'm not so much of a distraction.
Sure.
I just kind of want to listen in because I did see the other 2 Zoom meets and those did provide quite a bit of information.
Okay. Well, so far it's just the 2 of you, so it's all up to you. If you have something you want me to go over, let me know.
Okay.
And that goes for the whole quarter.
Oh, okay. Actually,
Because you all are in the throes of, prepping for the final on Monday.
right. I did have a question. I keep on getting goofed up when we're talking about what was it, like the neurotransmitters from like the alpha beta cells.
Okay. Yeah. Right. That's important. So let me drag up a picture here. Hang on just a second. Okay. So you see a blank screen?
yet.
Okay. Yeah, this is important stuff.
Yeah, I
So
keep on.
we are, go ahead.
Oh no, I keep on meaning to go back and look at it and look for all the information, and I just
Well,
get
maybe we
my-
can, if you'd like, I could summarize it here.
Could you? That'd
Yeah.
be perfect.
Okay. So there are lots of different neurotransmitters. We've been looking in these courses of A&P, we've been looking at two basic classes. We've been looking at cholinergic and adrenergic. So choline is referring to acetylcholine. So anything dealing with acetylcholine is cholinergic. And adrenergic is referring to adrenaline. And adrenaline, just to keep it a little bit more confusing, adrenaline in this country is also known as epinephrine.
Mom,
Same thing.
look it.
Dr. Sheen, were you writing something?
Yeah, can you not see it?
No, we just see you
Yeah,
write-
good. Thanks. Of course not, because I'm not sharing the screen. Let's share the screen. How is that?
Perfect.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's okay.
If we were in class, you'd be throwing things up to the front, right? Okay, so cholinergic is referring to acetylcholine. Adrenergic is referring to adrenaline, which is also epinephrine. So the neurotransmitters is acetylcholine. And the neurotransmitters for adrenergic are epinephrine and norepinephrine, like first cousins. Make sure you can spell epinephrine correctly. If you're a phonetic speller like me, I remember it as nor, and then pinephrine. And that's how I pronounce it in my brain, and then I know how to spell it, or at least it helps. So those are the neurotransmitters that we're looking at. And then we have receptors. So we have cholinergic receptors that will bind acetylcholine. They bind ACH. And those are in the two flavors, if you will, are nicotinic and muscarinic. So this is just introducing the sort of the cast of characters. And the receptors for adrenergic hormones, they will bind epinephrine and norepinephrine. So they bind epinephrine and norepinephrine. And they come in several varieties. And we have looked at 3 varieties in the sequence of classes. We have looked at alpha receptors, Greek symbol alpha. and we've looked at beta receptors. And they come in two subclasses, beta 1 and beta 2. Again, if you're using the Greek symbols, there's beta, beta 1, and beta 2. Okay, so those are the pieces. And then you just need to know which receptor goes on, goes where, and what what will bind them. So what binds beta 1? Right? So norepinephrine and epinephrine will bind all of these. And ACH will bind those. Okay, and then we did things like this. We made some pictures. And if this is a central nervous system, cerebrum, spinal cord, cerebellum, if that was our CNS, then we put some motor neurons onto this. So pretty much what we have talked about in this class have all been motor neurons. We've gone out to the heart, we've gone out to smooth muscle, we've gone out to skeletal muscle. Those are all motor neurons. So as far as motor neurons go, we haven't done much with the sensory neurons, and we haven't really talked about what goes on in the CNS. So as far as the motor neurons go, we looked at somatic motor neurons last quarter. And those were going to skeletal muscle. Remember that skeletal muscle is voluntary. So if you can move it voluntarily, it's skeletal muscle. The other motor neurons that we looked at were autonomic. And you remember that with autonomic, we are going to three types of effectors. We're going to smooth muscle. Now, let me back up and let me keep this sort of consistent. So these are autonomic motor neurons. And they go to smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands, like sweat glands, saliva glands, etc. Okay? And you know that there are two divisions of the autonomic system, and autonomic is all motor. Autonomic is not sensory. We had the parasympathetic, and we had the sympathetic. So that should be somewhat familiar from earlier, although it may just take a minute to come back and review that. Are we good so far?
Yeah, so far.
Okay, so then we just put in some pieces, like let's go, these are the effectors over here. So we'll just label those the effectors. I don't know if this yellow works very well. Probably not. So here's our brain and central nervous system again over on the left. And let's go out to, we'll just start picking some of those effectors. Let's go to, oh, I don't know, let's go to a skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle of your choosing. I don't know, maybe it's a quadriceps muscle. So we'll just call it skeletal muscle. So we have to get a somatic motor neuron. And these somatic motor pathways are one neuron pathways. So we only have one neuron leaving the central nervous system. So we could do it sort of something like this. Leaves out through a spinal nerve, one neuron, it goes out to our skeletal muscle. Okay. And those motor neurons, these are somatic. And they all release ACH. So this is a cholinergic neuron. So you know that it releases ACH. So when those action potentials arrive at the axon terminal, they release ACH. And then on the skeletal muscle, we need a cholinergic receptor. So there's our cholinergic receptor. And you have two choices. Nicotinic or muscarinic. Do you remember which one is on skeletal muscle? A long time ago. Nicotinic. And these pathways are always stimulatory, meaning they always cause the muscle to contract. They never inhibit a muscle. So once these action potentials go to the muscle, they always cause the muscle to contract. You can inhibit the muscle, but that occurs back in the CNS. That pretty much takes care of somatic motor pathways. All the rest of it is for autonomic. Does this help?
Yeah, that helps out a lot.
Okay, good. Well, let's see if we can go through the autonomic maybe a little bit quicker. So your effectors for autonomic are the smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. So let's go to another picture, I guess. It would be nice if I could just keep this information on the screen. Maybe what I could do is crowd it a little bit more. Let's try this. Get rid of that. And let's go to, what do you want to go to? Heart, glands,
Cardiac
or,
muscles.
pardon me?
Cardiac muscles sound good.
Okay, so let's put a heart in here. I'll put it down here, get it out of the way. Oh, it's got to be red. Hang on. Okay. So this is going to be an autonomic pathway. And let's put our, well, we're going to the cardiac muscle. So these are, let's do a sympathetic pathway. First of all, you know that the heart is dually innervated. So it's innervated by both parasympathetic and sympathetic. So let's call this dual innervation to the heart. Dual innervation, meaning that it has both sympathetic, I'm going to abbreviate sympathetic, symp, and parasymp. And you know that one speeds it up and one slows it down. One increases cardiac output, one decreases cardiac output. So let's do, which one do you want to do first? Do you want to speed it up or slow it down?
Let's speed it up.
Okay, good. So would that be a sympathetic or a parasympathetic?
I want to say sympathetic.
Good. Yeah, sympathetic is fight or flight.
right.
You're doing something to save your life. It's stressful. So sympathetic, those pathways leave the spinal cord, and it's a 2-neuron chain. So let me squeeze that in over here. So these are 2 neurons. It's a 2-neuron chain after the spinal cord. So here is our first one. Now we're going to have to add neurotransmitters and receptors. So here is the cell body of the second neuron. And it goes down here and it goes to the SA node, goes to the AV node. And it's going to get crowded. And there are also fibers that go to the myocardium. Okay, so let's do the neurotransmitters. This is a ganglion. These are your sympathetic chain ganglion or other ganglion. We talked about the sympathetic chain ganglion last quarter. But at any rate, we need to do the neurotransmitter and receptor. So the pattern here is exactly the same as with the somatic motor neuron. The first neuron coming out of the spinal cord, in the case of somatic, there was only one, it released ACH. Same thing with sympathetic and parasympathetic. The first neuron out of the spinal cord is always cholinergic. So it's going to be releasing ACH, and the postsynaptic membrane will always have a cholinergic receptor. So we release ACH. Into the synapse, and we have a nicotinic receptor. Is that good so far?
Yeah.
Okay. That stimulates the postganglionic neuron and action potentials, you know, they go zipping along. And this neuron is a adrenergic neuron, the second one. And it is going to release norepinephrine. It's actually coming out of the neurons, right? But I'm too crowded here to draw all that. Are we good?
Yep.
And then you need an adrenergic receptor on the heart. Which one do you want to use? This is where we'll use the beta 1. Beta 1 receptor. Remember from ANP1, we talked about beta 1 on the heart, beta 2 in the lungs. You have one heart and you have two lungs, if that helps to remember them. And then the response here is to increase cardiac output. You want me to keep going?
I don't mind if nobody else has questions.
Okay. Well, I'll take a breather here just to see, and if we do have questions, I'll just note them, and then we'll come back to them. Let's keep going then, because this is important. So we've done somatic, motor, and we've done sympathetic. So I'm going to go to a new page here. So what you need to do to practice this is to just do this sort of a thing, whip out a central nervous system and put in an effector. So maybe put in a skeletal muscle effector like we did, and put in the heart, and let's do a sympathetic pathway. So you need to practice and repeat what we just did on the other side here. And you're looking for neurotransmitters and receptors. So the skeletal muscle, that was ACH on the nicotinic receptors, and it always caused contraction. For a sympathetic, we had a 2-neuron chain. And at this point, it was ACH onto a nicotinic receptor on the cell body of the second cell. And down here at the effector level, we had norepinephrine onto beta 1. That's the sort of detail that you need to be able to remember. And so just drawing a simple sketch like this helps. Okay, so let's do the heart, and let's do a parasympathetic to the heart. And here is our SA node, primary target for the parasympathetic. So we're going to do a parasympathetic path. To the heart. So 2-neuron chain. Parasympathetic pathways leave the sacrum and they leave the cranium through cranial nerves. And the nerve that slows the heart down, the parasympathetic fibers travel through the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve. So let's put the cell body in the CNS. Comes out of the cranial nerve, leaves the cranium, leaves the skull through a hole. And it's fairly long, goes down close to the heart now where it's synapses. So there's our 2-neuron chain for a parasympathetic pathway. And the only cranial nerve that we're dealing with is the vagus nerve, which is number 10. So CN for cranial nerve 10. And this is Roman numeral 10. And this is the vagus nerve. This is motor. The vagus nerve is a mixed nerve, but right now we're just looking at a motor pathway. And here is the synapse. It's the same pattern now as before. The first neuron is cholinergic, and the receptor on the postsynaptic cell is nicotinic. So again, it's ACH onto a nicotinic receptor. So that makes this fiber cholinergic, right? Cholinergic fiber, a cholinergic neuron. With parasympathetic, the second neuron is also cholinergic. Neuron fiber are interchangeable. So that is going to be releasing ACH. The second neuron releases ACH. And the receptor on the SA node still has to be a nicotinic receptor, or excuse me, it has to be a cholinergic receptor, but in this case, it's going to be muscarinic. And the response is to slow the heart rate. Okay? So parasympathetic pathways are leaving the cranium and the sacrum. So they're cranial nerves and sacral nerves. Sympathetic pathways they leave CNS at the thoracolumbar region. So this is thorax and lower back. That's what we're doing over here. So this is the thoracolumbar region. That's kind of a minor detail, but it's worth knowing. I'm sure you went over that last quarter. Just a couple others to do. So we've done skeletal muscle and we've done heart. You should practice those. And let's do blood vessels. So let's do another CNS. And let's go to the vascular smooth muscle. So here is a blood vessel. Larger one, you know that it has smooth muscle in it. Right? So this is vascular smooth muscle. And this, of course, is going to regulate blood pressure. We squeeze the blood vessels, we squeeze the blood, and the pressure goes up. If we allow the smooth muscle to relax, you squeeze the blood less and the pressure goes down. So these are sympathetic pathways, no parasympathetic. Path only to vascular smooth muscle. Other smooth muscle, like the smooth muscle in the iris of the eye and the smooth muscle and around the bronchioles, they're under both sympathetic and parasympathetic control. But the blood vessels are only under sympathetic. If you want to lower the blood pressure, you just stop squeezing the muscle. So we need a sympathetic pathway. So it's the same pattern here. First neuron coming out, that thoracolumbar region, relatively short. And then the second neuron is relatively long. And here is our ganglion again. It's the same pattern. So you know that the first neuron out is releasing ACH, and that goes on to a nicotinic receptor on the postsynaptic membrane. The second neuron, since this is sympathetic, you know, is an adrenergic neuron, and it's releasing norepinephrine. And then we have to choose an adrenergic receptor. And in this case, it's alpha, one of the classes of alpha receptor. So the alpha receptor is on the smooth muscle. And that will cause contraction. And that will increase the blood pressure. So the more action potentials go to the smooth muscle, the more the muscle squeezes the blood and the greater the blood pressure. Okay, probably just one last piece. Where is epinephrine in all of this story? We haven't seen it. We've talked about norepinephrine being released from the sympathetic, the post-second neuron, the post-ganglionic sympathetic fiber, these guys. So norepinephrine is released. Epinephrine, let me go to another page. I would put it all on the same page, but it's getting too crowded. Oops. So again, here's our CNS. And now we are going to go to the adrenal gland. So here is the kidney, ureter, sort of thing. And here is the adrenal gland. Looks like a Bart Simpson hairdo. And we have the cortex and the medulla. And while we're on this, and while we're doing review, the adrenal cortex, just to review, releases steroids. And those are primarily the ones that we've looked at. Those steroid hormones were aldosterone. We just spent a lot of time talking about how aldosterone works in the kidney. And the other one is cortisol. We haven't spent a lot of time on. We talked about it last quarter with the endocrine system. But cortisol is a stress hormone. So when you are stressed, when you are under fight or flight stress, your cortisol levels go up, which is a good thing if it's temporary. It allows you to deal with the stress. It's a bad thing if the cortisol levels remain elevated. Like if a person is in a stressful situation for a good part of their life, their cortisol levels are elevated, and that's bad news. So you have to get stress down. And that's, of course, easier said than done. But back to our story here. This is the adrenal medulla. Oops, I think it's 1L. And that is going to release releases both epinephrine and norepinephrine, pretty much at the same time. So this accounts for about 80% of what's released. And about 20% of what's released from the adrenal medulla is norepinephrine. Both of those, though, will bind all adrenergic receptors. So wherever there's an alpha receptor, a beta 1, or a beta 2, these two will bind. Will bind any and all adrenergic receptors. As it goes into the blood. Okay. So to get that released, I'm just about done with this. You probably feel like I'm going on too long. This is the one exception to that 2-neuron chain. And all you really need to know is that this is a sympathetic path. And if that's the case, then this one has to be a cholinergic neuron. But that's not that important. What's more important probably is that it's a single neuron going to the adrenal medulla. It turns out that the second neuron, you don't need to remember this, is actually inside the cell. It's a modified cell inside, but that's okay. What you need to remember is that it's sympathetic pathway to the adrenal medulla, and then coming out of that is the norepinephrine and epinephrine. Both of them. 80%, 20% sort of thing. So they will bind to the vascular smooth muscle and cause the alpha receptors to contract. They will bind to the beta 1 receptors on the heart and cause the cardiac output to go up. This is adrenaline. So when you have an adrenaline rush, all sorts of things happen. The pupils dilate, the brain gets goofy, it starts going into tunnel vision, heart rate goes up, breathing rate goes up, all being affected by the sort of a general sympathetic response. Okay, I do have one more piece. So the lungs. So here is our CNS again. I guess we have a green one now. And here is our lung. And what we're talking about in the lungs, when we say we have, when we're going to the lungs with a sympathetic or a parasympathetic response, we're talking about the bronchiolar smooth muscle. So here is our trachea, little C-shaped cartilages. And then here was our little carina. And then here are primary and bronchi. And then they branch, of course. And I don't want to keep doing this forever. So I'm just going to draw it like this. These are representing the bronchioles. And you know that, so all the branches are bronchioles, and you know that they're lined with smooth muscle. And this is what allows for bronchoconstriction, bronchodilation. So this is bronchiolar smooth muscle. Okay. So the bronchiolar smooth muscle can contract or relax. For it to contract, that's done by parasympathetic fibers. So you have parasympathetic neurons that run out just as before and contact the bronchiolar smooth muscle. So you could put the neurotransmitters in again, ACH, the nicotinic receptor. And at the effector for the smooth muscle, it's still ACH, but it's muscarinic now. And that response will cause bronchoconstriction. The smooth muscle contracts. Narrowing of the airways. Okay? That's a parasympathetic response. Okay, good. So we can contract the airways, but we don't want them to contract. We want them to relax sometimes. So for them to relax, they have beta-2 receptors on them. Remember we said we had beta-2 in the lungs, 2 lungs, beta-2s. So in addition to having muscarinic receptors, we also have beta-2 receptors on the same bronchiolar smooth muscle. There are no neurons going to beta-2. So the way that the beta-2 receptors are stimulated is through epinephrine. And you remember that the epinephrine is coming from the adrenal medulla. And there's also some norepinephrine also. But it's mainly the adrenaline, the epinephrine. And this is coming through the blood. So here comes our epinephrine. And it binds the beta 2s. And here it causes relaxation. Let's say relaxation. And that leads to bronchodilation. Because you have to run for your life, you want your airways to open up. You sure don't want them to constrict. Let's say we have asthma. You have questions. So if you want the airways to constrict, it's parasympathetic. If you want the airways to dilate, it's epinephrine onto beta 2s. And the epinephrine is coming from the adrenal gland through the blood. So notes. One, beta 2 receptors are not innervated. We don't have sympathetic neurons going to the beta 2 receptors. They're being stimulated by the hormone epinephrine through the blood. Another note is our asthma rescue meds. For example, albuterol. Albuterol is classified as a beta 2 agonist. So when you're looking at and studying drug actions, there's a whole class of beta 2 agonists. Albuterol is one example. So an agonist, you know, stimulates a receptor. So you have asthma, tightening of the airways, you inhale albuterol, and the albuterol binds to the beta 2 receptors and stimulates them, which causes the smooth muscle to relax and the airways open. And boy, that's everything that we've done pretty much with the nervous system for ANP2 and most of ANP1. Oh, I hope that helps. You have several slides and most of this Zoom meeting on that. It's a great review. This information you will use as a nurse. You're going to be dealing with meds, and different meds will be working on different receptors. So, yeah, turn that question into about a 50-minute lecture.
Well, I appreciate it. It saved me a lot of time
Oh,
going
good.
back to review stuff.
You know, the old joke about professors anyway is they can't say anything in less than 50 minutes. So I guess I'm good.
Perfect.
Anything else though? This is essentially our last Zoom meeting.
Hmm.
The add-on from the email that you sent us about I can't remember, it was fetal development.
Yeah, the fetal circulation, I think.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was just the video that you had on the extras or something like that, right?
Yeah, I think it was under, just a minute. I think it was under miscellaneous.
Okay.
Hang on, let me pull that up. Did you find the video okay?
I think, yeah, I found it, and it talked about like the baby has two arteries going through to the placenta,
Oh,
and then,
yeah.
or is it two veins and one artery back?
Two arteries out, two arteries to the placenta and one vein back.
And those are
So, yeah, okay, where did my Zoom bar go again? Stop share, let's do a new share. That out of the way. Okay, so here's my pic. You see my picture of Canvas?
Uh-huh.
This is what mine looks like, but you have modules in there, usually are arranged a little bit different. But it was under miscellaneous resources.
Okay.
No, it isn't. It's under lab. I try to hide these things, you know. I'm just kidding. So it's arteries and veins to know.
One.
And then there are a series of links, and the last video at the bottom was on fetal circulation.
Okay.
And the pictures were, let's do that real quick. You have to see if I can launch this. I probably should have done it through, well, this works, I think. Do you see my PowerPoint slides?
Not yet.
All right, hang on a second. Let's just stop everything, restart it.
Now I
you
do.
Yeah. Okay. So at the bottom of this were a series of slides for the fetal circulation. Here's my goofy little drawing. It's the idea crossed, and this is what I talked about in lecture. So you recognize, you know, this, you see the aorta and then the internal iliacs. I can't draw on the screen right now.
Okay.
But you have the two blue umbilical arteries going to the placenta.
Yeah.
And so the trick is that they're coming off the internal iliacs. So you have two internal iliacs, so we have wind up with two umbilical arteries.
Okay.
And they are low oxygen, just like the pulmonary arteries were low oxygen. So these carry blood out to the placenta where it gets oxygenated, and that returns through one umbilical vein. Sort of goes through the liver and then back into the vena cava.
Okay.
And then, you know, there's some better anatomical pictures. They're also showing the pulmonary bypasses in the heart also, so you could review that, the foraminal valley and the ductus arteriosus. Good. Anything else?
So basically all of these are pretty much fair game for the exam, right?
Yeah, right. Now, we only have so much time and I can only write so many questions. So I obviously can't do everything. And that's probably not helpful because I don't know what I'm going to put on it exactly. It's all fair game, but what I try to do is ask you questions about material that you've already been tested on.
Okay.
So if I do any arteries and veins, they'll likely be the same pictures because I'm not likely to go back and redraw more pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were doing that, that's where that material would come from. So review those homework assignments on arteries and veins. And I'd go back and review your quizzes. You still have access to those.
Right.
So take a look at, because those are a pretty good sampling of what we did for each module.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started looking at the tests, and that's why I noticed like a lot of I was getting mixed up with the muscarinic and the nicotinic receptor.
Right. That's an easy one to get mixed up on. But it is a very important one. If you get that down, it will help immensely if you go on into nursing.
Okay.
Well, we're about out of time.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I hope you do well on the quiz and I hope you do well on the final exam.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
I will be good. All
Bye.
right. Well, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.